The synthetic bourbon burned like liquid regret as it slid down Jake Reeves' throat. Each sip a reminder that even in the 24th century, military-grade alcohol still tasted like someone had filtered it through a fusion reactor's exhaust port. He leaned against the observation deck's reinforced transparasteel, watching the stars drift past in their eternal dance, and wondered if the Zephyrians had better liquor. Probably did, knowing his luck. "You know, Sarge, they say drinking alone is the first sign of a problem," came a voice from behind him, accompanied by the soft hiss of the deck's atmospheric recyclers. Jake didn't turn around. He recognized the voice of Corporal Martinez, whose timing was about as reliable as the ship's artificial gravity during combat maneuvers. "Yeah. Well, they also said first contact would be peaceful and enlightening. Look how that turned out." Martinez settled beside him with a grunt, his own flask appearing as if materialized by some alcohol-detecting quantum field. To be fair, nobody specified which species would be doing the enlightening. The Zephyrians certainly opened our eyes to some new ways of getting shot at. The UES Meridian groaned around them, its hull plates contracting as they cooled from their latest engagement. 46 hours ago, they'd been exchanging plasma fire with Zephyrian interceptors over a mineral-rich asteroid field that neither species had any real claim to. Now they were limping back to Titan Station with a casualty list longer than Jake's patience for military briefings. "Remember when our biggest worry was whether the coffee synthesizer would break down again?" Jake took another sip, watching a debris field sparkle in the distance like deadly confetti. "Now I'm wondering if the enemy has better personal hygiene products than we do. Their armor always looks so pristine." "That's because they're not rolling around in Martian mud trying to avoid getting vaporized," Martinez pointed out. "Though I heard from Chen in engineering that their tech runs on some kind of bio-neural interface. Imagine having to think your way through a software update." Jake snorted. "Great. Even their computers are more evolved than our relationship with the mess hall food synthesizer. Speaking of which, did you try that new beef they're serving? I'm pretty sure it's actually recycled boot leather with flavor enhancers." The observation deck's lights dimmed automatically as they entered the ship's night cycle, casting everything in the soft blue glow that was supposed to regulate their circadian rhythms. Jake had given up on normal sleep cycles about 3 deployments ago. The stimulant cocktails they pumped into combat troops made regular rest about as likely as finding a Zephyrian who wanted to sit down for peace talks. "You ever wonder what they're really like?" Martinez asked, his voice taking on that philosophical tone that usually preceded either profound insights or complete nonsense. "I mean, under all that armor and technology. Do they have families? Do they tell jokes? Do their kids ask stupid questions about why the sky is blue? Probably ask why space is black," Jake replied. "And knowing our luck, they've got a perfectly reasonable scientific explanation instead of making something up about atmospheric light scattering." A comm unit crackled to life somewhere in the distance, broadcasting the usual litany of ship status updates and duty roster changes. The Meridian housed nearly 3,000 souls, all of them trying to pretend that shooting at aliens for a living was somehow a normal career path. Jake had stopped trying to figure out how humanity had gone from dreaming about exploring the cosmos to having firefights in it. "You know what the really insane part is?" Jake continued, warming to his theme. "We've been fighting them for 3 years, and nobody's actually tried to sit down and have a conversation. It's all been plasma fire and tactical maneuvers. For all we know, this whole war started because someone misunderstood a greeting." Martinez raised his flask in a mock toast. "To the power of poor communication and really excellent weapons technology." They drank in companionable silence, 2 soldiers sharing the kind of moment that felt stolen from the universe's apparent determination to keep everyone shooting at each other. The stars wheeled past, indifferent to human concerns about war and peace, and whether alien coffee might taste better than the synthetic sludge they'd been choking down for months. "Shift change in 20 minutes, Martinez noted, checking the chronometer embedded in his wrist display. "You going to try for some sleep, or are you planning to drink yourself into a philosophical stupor about the nature of interstellar conflict?" "Option 2 sounds more appealing," Jake admitted. "Plus, the bunks still smell like whatever Chen spilled in the ventilation system last week. I swear he's conducting chemical experiments down there." "Could be worse," Martinez said, standing and stretching. "Could be conducting biological experiments, Remember that thing with the hydroponics bay? Jake shuddered theatrically. Don't remind me. I'm still not convinced those weren't actually alien spores he was growing. The tomatoes moved when nobody was looking. As Martinez headed for the exit, his footsteps echoing in the observation deck's relative quiet, Jake remained at his post by the window. Somewhere out there, Zephyrian ships were probably doing the same thing. Limping home from battles nobody really wanted to fight, carrying soldiers who just wanted to see their families again. The thought was simultaneously comforting and deeply depressing. He raised his flask toward the stars, offering a silent toast to the absurdity of it all. 3 years of war, countless skirmishes, and they were probably no closer to understanding each other than when it all started. But at least the alcohol was consistent, even if everything else had gone completely insane. The ship's atmospheric processors hummed their mechanical lullaby, and Jake settled in for another sleepless night among the stars. Debris field ahead, approximately 12 kilometers off the starboard bow, announced Lieutenant Rodriguez from the pilot's seat, her voice carrying that particular blend of boredom and professional alertness that came from too many routine patrols. Looks like someone had a really bad day out here. Jake adjusted his helmet's heads-up display, watching the tactical readout populate with floating chunks of what had once been spacecraft. The reconnaissance shuttle * Lucky Strike wasn't much to look at, about as elegant as a flying toolbox with delusions of grandeur. But it had kept them alive through more missions than Jake cared to count. "Define really bad day," called Sergeant Torres from the weapons station, his fingers already dancing over the targeting controls with the nervous energy of someone who'd learned not to trust quiet moments in space. "Are we talking forgot to file the proper paperwork bad, or accidentally flew into a black hole bad? More like ran into something with bigger guns bad," Rodriguez replied, adjusting their approach vector. "Scanning signatures suggests Zephyrian construction, but the debris pattern is all wrong for a typical engagement. Looks more like they evacuated in a hurry than got blown to pieces." Jake studied the scattered remains floating in the gravity shadow of a barren moon that looked like someone had taken a cosmic cheese grater to its surface. Could be a trap. Nothing says, "Please come investigate," like conveniently abandoned enemy hardware. Or, Torres suggested with the kind of optimism that usually preceded disaster, they finally realized that fighting over empty space is about as productive as teaching quantum mechanics to a houseplant, and decided to go home. The debris field stretched out before them like a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle designed by someone with a severe case of attention deficit disorder. Hull fragments tumbled slowly in the vacuum, their surfaces catching and reflecting the distant sun's light in random patterns that made Jake's eyes water. Among the wreckage, larger pieces remained intact, what looked like habitat modules and research equipment that had been hastily jettisoned rather than destroyed. "I'm reading massive power signatures from that structure at coordinates 77 Mark 12, Rodriguez announced, highlighting a cylindrical object roughly the size of a city bus. "It's definitely not a weapons platform, but it's running hot enough to melt chocolate at 50 meters. "Great," Torres muttered. "Alien technology that could either revolutionize our understanding of the universe or turn us into component atoms. I love these kinds of discoveries." Jake made the command decision that would either earn him a commendation or a court-martial. "Take us in for a closer look, but keep the engines warm and the weapons warmer. If this goes sideways, I want to be able to run away really, really fast." The * Lucky Strike maneuvered through the debris field with the grace of a drunken elephant, Rodriguez skillfully avoiding the larger chunks while muttering what sounded like mathematical prayers under her breath. The cylindrical structure grew larger in their viewports, revealing itself to be far more complex than initial scans had suggested. Alien text covered its hull in flowing patterns that hurt to look at directly, and strange geometric projections extended from its surface like crystalline growths. "Definitely a research station," Jake concluded, studying the sensor data. "Look at all those sensor arrays and analysis equipment. Either they were studying something really fascinating out here, or they had the galaxy's most expensive hobby. Maybe they were trying to figure out why humans insist on putting cheese on everything," Torres suggested. "I mean, if I were an alien anthropologist, that would definitely make my list of inexplicable behaviors." Rodriguez brought them alongside what appeared to be a docking port, or at least something that looked docking port adjacent if you squinted and used your imagination. I'm detecting atmosphere inside. Artificial gravity is functioning, life support is active, and there's even what might be mood lighting. Either this is the most welcoming trap in the galaxy, or someone left in such a hurry they forgot to turn off the utilities. It could be both, Jake pointed out. Maybe they left it running as bait, or maybe they're just really environmentally conscious and didn't want to waste power. The docking procedure involved a lot of creative engineering, and what Tors cheerfully referred to as aggressive negotiation between incompatible technologies. Their magnetic clamps eventually found purchase on something that might have been designed for the purpose, or might have just been conveniently magnetic. Sealing the connection now, Rodriguez announced. Atmospheric pressure is equalizing and we have a green light for boarding. Although I should probably mention that our universal translator is having what it describes as an existential crisis, trying to parse their user interface. Jake checked his sidearm and activated his suit's recording systems. Standard exploration protocol. We go in, look around, try not to touch anything that glows or makes noise, and definitely don't activate any machinery that might be a doomsday device. What if it's a really interesting doomsday device? Tors asked, already moving toward the airlock. I mean, hypothetically speaking. Then we take pictures and let the science division figure out how to make it someone else's problem. The airlock cycled with mechanical precision, revealing an interior that was somehow both alien and familiar. The architecture followed curves and angles that human eyes wanted to follow, but couldn't quite understand, while the lighting seemed to come from the walls themselves rather than any visible source. Equipment hummed quietly throughout the station, displaying information in scripts that looked like someone had convinced mathematics to dance. Okay, this is either really advanced science or really elaborate art, Tors observed, running his scanner over a console that appeared to be made from crystallized geometry. My equipment is reading energy patterns that don't match anything in our databases, which could mean revolutionary new technology or a really good practical joke. Jake moved deeper into the station, following corridors that seemed to shift perspective as he walked. The Zephyrians apparently had different ideas about how space should be organized, resulting in architecture that was functional but mildly nauseating to human sensibilities. Contact, Sarge, Rodriguez's voice crackled through the comm system. I've found what looks like the main laboratory, and you're going to want to see this. It's either the most advanced research facility in the galaxy, or someone really went overboard decorating their fish tank. Jake made his way toward Rodriguez's position, passing chambers filled with equipment that defied easy categorization. Some devices looked like they belonged in a physics laboratory, while others resembled abstract sculptures with delusions of being useful. The universal translator continued its existential crisis in the background, occasionally offering helpful suggestions like warning, danger, and please insert appropriate currency. The main lab is through here, Rodriguez called out, her voice echoing strangely in the alien acoustics. And I think I found something that might explain why they left in such a hurry. Jake rounded the corner and stopped, staring at what was unmistakably a preservation chamber sitting in the center of the laboratory like a technological shrine. Its surface, Jake stared at the control panel for what felt like several geological epochs, trying to decode symbols that looked like someone had convinced abstract mathematics to have an argument with itself. The preservation chamber hummed quietly, its opalescent surface pulsing with rhythms that might have been heartbeats or might have been the alien equivalent of elevator music. You know, Sarge, Tors said, peering over his shoulder. In every horror movie ever made, this is exactly the moment where someone says, what could go wrong, and then everything goes spectacularly wrong. That's encouraging, Jake replied, studying a symbol that resembled a question mark having an existential crisis. But consider this, we're already in a war with these people. How much worse could it get? Famous last words, Rodriguez chimed in from across the lab, where she was attempting to interface their portable computer with what appeared to be an alien filing cabinet. Although I have to admit, their user interface design is actually pretty intuitive once you accept that logic is apparently optional. Jake's helmet display flickered as the universal translator made another valiant attempt at comprehension. The words revival sequence appeared briefly before being replaced by happy breakfast time and then existential dread protocol. He made a mental note to have a serious conversation with the engineering department about their translation algorithms. I think this might be the activation sequence, he announced, pointing to a series of glowing symbols that formed what could charitably be called a pattern. Either that, or I'm about to order takeout in a language I don't speak. Torres consulted his scanner, which was beeping with the frantic enthusiasm of a machine that had encountered something it couldn't categorize. Life signs are definitely present, and they're getting stronger. Whatever's in there is either waking up or getting ready to explode, possibly both. Great, Jake muttered, reaching toward what he hoped was the activation control. If this goes badly, I want you to know that it was Tor's idea. Hey, I just said we should investigate, Torres protested. You're the one who decided to play alien video games with potentially dangerous equipment. Jake pressed the symbol, and the chamber responded with a sound like wind chimes made from crystallized starlight. The preservation medium began to drain, revealing more details of the figure inside. What they saw made Jake forget how to breathe for several seconds. The occupant was definitely Zephyrian, but unlike any enemy combatant they'd encountered. Were the soldiers they'd fought wore intimidating armor and moved with mechanical precision. This being possessed an otherworldly grace that made the artificial gravity seem like a quaint suggestion. Her features were fundamentally humanoid, but refined in ways that suggested evolutionary paths humanity had never explored. Okay, Torres said quietly, that's not what I was expecting. The woman's ears were long and pointed, extending gracefully from her skull in elegant curves that somehow managed to be both alien and beautiful. Her skin carried a subtle luminescence, as if someone had found a way to weave moonlight into living tissue. Even unconscious and emerging from whatever preservation process had kept her alive, she radiated a presence that made their military-issue equipment feel crude and clumsy. Is it just me, Rodriguez asked, or does she look like someone took the concept of elegant and decided to show off? The chamber finished its cycle, and the woman's eyes opened. They were large and expressive, colored like deep ocean water caught in starlight. She blinked several times, clearly disoriented, and spoke something in her native language that their translator rendered as, "Where is my sandwich?" I don't think that's right, Jake said, checking his equipment. Unless alien scientists have the same priorities as human ones. The woman sat up slowly, her movements flowing like water finding its level. She looked around the laboratory with growing concern, speaking rapidly in her musical language. The translator cycled through several interpretations. The research must continue. My calculations were incomplete. And has anyone seen my favorite pen? The translation matrix is definitely having issues, Rodriguez reported. But from her body language, I'd say she's confused and possibly worried about something important. Jake stepped forward carefully, hands visible and empty. We're not here to hurt you, he said slowly, hoping the translator would manage something coherent in return. We found your station drifting. Can you understand us? The woman turned toward him, and Jake felt something fundamental shift in his understanding of the universe. Her gaze was intelligent and curious, completely lacking the hostility he'd expected from an enemy combatant. When she spoke again, the translator managed to produce something approaching coherent language. You are human military personnel, she said, her voice carrying musical tones that made their comm systems sound like gravel mixers. This is unexpected but not unwelcome. I am Lyrian, xenobiologist of the Third Research Consortium. Xenobiologist, Torres repeated. So you study aliens, which technically makes us your specialty. Lyrian tilted her head in a gesture that was simultaneously alien and charmingly familiar. Indeed, though I must confess, encountering live specimens was not part of my research protocol. Live specimens, Jake said. I like how she makes us sound like we should be in test tubes. My research concerns quantum resonance patterns in dark matter formations, Lyrian continued, apparently taking their conversation as a perfectly normal turn of events. I was analyzing data from the Hesperus anomaly when there was an emergency evacuation order. Rodriguez looked up from the alien computer she'd been attempting to access. Emergency evacuation. What kind of emergency makes an entire research station pack up and leave a scientist in cold storage? Lyrian's expression grew troubled, her luminous features clouding with what appeared to be genuine concern. The Coalition Command believed my research had military applications. They wanted to weaponize my findings about dimensional resonance. Weaponize dimensional resonance, Torres said thoughtfully. That sounds either incredibly dangerous or incredibly stupid, possibly both. I refuse to cooperate, Lyrian continued. The preservation chamber was my way of ensuring the research could not be misused while I was unable to protect it. Jake found himself studying her face, noting the way her expressions seemed to carry deeper meanings than human equivalents. So you put yourself into suspended animation rather than let your work be turned into a weapon. The mathematics involved could revolutionize space travel for all species, she replied, or destroy star systems if improperly applied. I chose to preserve both myself and the data until a more ethical solution could be found. Well, Jake said, realizing he was smiling for the first time in weeks. That's either the most principled thing I've ever heard or the most elaborate excuse for taking a really long nap. Lyrian's eyes widened slightly, and then she made a sound that could only be described as laughter, musical and bright in the alien acoustics of the station. I had not considered the recreational applications of preservation technology. Trust me, Tors added. After enough military rations, suspended animation starts looking like a viable lifestyle choice. As they talked, Jake found himself increasingly aware that he was having a normal conversation with someone who should theoretically be trying to kill him. The disconnect between expectation and reality, the hours that followed felt like living inside a quantum physics equation that had developed a sense of humor. Jake found himself sitting across from Lyrian in what had apparently been her personal workspace, surrounded by holographic displays showing mathematical concepts that made his brain itch just looking at them. Tors and Rodriguez had positioned themselves strategically around the lab, officially maintaining security, but mostly just trying to process the reality that they were having tea with an enemy scientist who made better conversation than most of their commanding officers. So let me understand this correctly, Jake said, accepting a cup of something that tasted like liquid starlight and definitely wasn't regulation military beverage. Your people think they're protecting trade routes from human corporate expansion, and our people think you're trying to conquer territory for strategic resources. Lyrian nodded, her long ears shifting in what he'd learned was her species' equivalent of a frustrated sigh. The Zephyrian Coalition Council receives reports from the merchant houses about aggressive human mining operations in disputed space. Your military responds to what they perceive as territorial expansion by an alien empire. And nobody bothered to actually talk to anybody else, Rodriguez added from her position near the communications array. It's like the galaxy's most expensive game of telephone played with plasma weapons. The beautiful irony, Tors chimed in while examining what appeared to be a device for analyzing subspace harmonics, is that we're all shooting at each other over mining rights that probably belong to some third species that hasn't even discovered fire yet. Jake studied Lyrian's face, noting the way her bioluminescent skin patterns shifted with her emotions. Over the past few hours, he'd learned to read those subtle changes, and right now they indicated something between amusement and profound sadness. Your research could actually solve this whole mess, couldn't it? The dimensional resonance data could revolutionize faster-than-light travel, she confirmed. Ships could traverse vast distances without requiring the fuel-intensive jump points that both our species fight to control. The resource conflicts would become irrelevant, but only if someone doesn't turn it into a weapon first, Jake said, understanding the weight she'd been carrying. Lyrian's expression grew distant, her luminous features reflecting the complex emotions of someone who'd chosen exile over compromise. The mathematics are elegant but dangerous. In the wrong hands, the same principles that could liberate both our peoples from resource scarcity could tear holes in spacetime itself. Jake found himself leaning forward, caught by the combination of her scientific passion and moral conviction. That's why you chose the preservation chamber. You were protecting the universe from your own discovery. I was protecting everyone from those who would misuse it, she corrected gently, including my own people. The moment hung between them, like a bridge made of starlight and possibility. Jake realized he was staring at her with something approaching wonder, and the words escaped before his military training could stop them. You are the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. The silence that followed was profound enough to have its own gravitational field. Tors made a sound that might have been a cough, or might have been him choking on alien tea. Rodriguez's scanner beeped urgently as she suddenly became very interested in monitoring something outside the station. Lyrian's luminescent patterns shifted through what Jake was learning to recognize as surprise, then something warmer and more complex. For a moment, her alien features seemed to glow with an inner light that had nothing to do with her species' natural bioluminescence. Then, slowly, she turned away. "I understand the sentiment," she said quietly, her musical voice carrying notes of regret that didn't require translation. But beauty observed across such a distance, it can only be appreciated, never touched. Jake felt something fundamental shift inside him, like gravity realigning itself around a new center of mass. Distance. "I am the daughter of House Cariel, bound by obligations to my people that transcend personal desires," she continued, still not meeting his eyes. "My research, my knowledge, my very existence serves purposes larger than individual happiness." "That sounds like a really elegant way of saying duty sucks," Tors observed with characteristic directness. Lyrian turned back toward them, and Jake saw something in her expression that looked remarkably like gratitude for his friend's bluntness. "Your species has a gift for reducing complex philosophical concepts to their essential truth. It's one of our better qualities," Jake agreed, "along with stubbornness and an irrational optimism about impossible situations." Rodriguez's scanner chose that moment to emit the particular sequence of beeps that meant incoming spacecraft, multiple contacts, moving fast. "Speaking of impossible situations, we've got company. Zephyrian ships closing on our position." "The Coalition found the station," Lyrian said, her patterns shifting to what Jake recognized as resignation mixed with determination. "They will want the research data, and they will not be interested in diplomatic solutions." Jake stood, his mind already shifting into tactical mode, even as part of him rebelled against the return to familiar patterns of conflict. "How long do we have?" 12 minutes until they're in effective weapons range," Rodriguez reported. "The good news is they're not shooting yet. The bad news is they're probably planning to board and secure whatever they find here." "Including you," Jake said to Lyrian. She nodded. "Including me and my research." Jake looked around the laboratory, taking in the quantum resonance data that could revolutionize space travel. The woman whose moral courage had impressed him more than any military decoration, and his teammates who were waiting for orders in a situation that had no good options. "Tors, how long would it take to download her research data?" "Are you insane?" Tors replied. "That's classified alien technology. Command would have my head if they found out I was copying enemy research files." "Rodriguez, can you establish a secure communication channel to the approaching ships?" "Probably, but my Zephyrian is limited to 'please don't shoot.' And where is the bathroom?" she replied. Although those might be the most useful phrases in this situation. Jake turned to Lyrian. "Can you explain to your people what we've figured out about the war being a massive misunderstanding?" "I can try," she said, "but the Coalition command may not be interested in hearing uncomfortable truths about their military policies." "Then we'll have to make them interested," Jake decided. "Tors, start copying everything. Rodriguez, open a channel to both the Zephyrian ships and our own command structure. We're going to try something that's either brilliant or guaranteed to get us all court-martialed." "What exactly are we trying?" Tors asked, his fingers already dancing over the alien interface controls. Jake looked at Lyrian, seeing in her luminous features a reflection of his own desperate hope that intelligence might triumph over institutional momentum. "We're going to tell the truth, all of it, to everyone. Over the next 10 minutes, as Zephyrian ships closed on their position and human command frequencies crackled with confused demands for status reports, Jake found himself explaining 3 years of interstellar warfare to both sides simultaneously. Lyrian translated, elaborated, and provided the scientific context that transformed their situation from a potential shooting match into something approaching a diplomatic breakthrough. The final transmission came from a Zephyrian commander whose voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Lyrian's translation was simple. "Both fleets are standing down. Formal negotiations will begin within the standard cycle." As the immediate crisis passed, Jake found himself alone with Lyrian in the laboratory while Tors and Rodriguez handled the technical details of their newfound peace. The weight of what they'd accomplished was beginning to settle, along with the realization that their impossible moment was ending. "Your duty calls," Jake said quietly. "As does yours," she replied. "But perhaps duty can sometimes serve a larger purpose than we originally imagined." Jake nodded, understanding that some distances couldn't be